Welcome back to Fanfics in a Nutshell. Today, we're stepping into one of the darkest Naruto timelines you can imagine, because this is not the story of a lonely boy earning the village's respect. This is the story of what happens when that boy is pushed so far, hurt so badly, and betrayed so completely that hope itself starts to feel like a joke. And once that happens, the question is no longer whether Naruto can save Konoha. The question is, what survives after Konoha creates the very monster it always claimed to fear? It begins, fittingly, with hope. Not the bright kind, not the heroic kind, the kind people preach when they are not the ones suffering, the kind people hand to a child like a bandage while they look away from the knife. In this version of the story, Naruto grows up hearing the same poison dressed as comfort over and over again. Be patient, endure, forgive them, they are grieving, they are afraid. One day, they will accept you. One day, they will see you. One day, the pain will mean something. But by the time this story truly starts, Naruto has already learned the ugliest truth in his world. Hope is not saving him. Hope is what kept him standing still while everyone else took pieces out of him. On the night of his birthday, that illusion finally dies. The fic wastes no time making its point. Naruto is not just neglected here. He is brutalized, dragged into the kind of suffering that strips away every last romantic excuse Konoha ever hid behind. He is whipped, burned, chained, dropped into salt water, treated less like a person than something disposable, something foul, something the village can punish simply because it exists. And the horror of the scene is not only in the pain itself. It is in the fact that Naruto has already spent years trying to earn mercy from people who never intended to give it. That is what makes this opening hit so hard. Naruto is not angry because one bad night pushed him over the edge. He is angry because this night confirms what every other year of his life has been trying to tell him. He was never being tested. He was never being prepared. He was never on the road to acceptance. He was being conditioned to endure abuse quietly and call it growth. And as he lies there, broken, half-conscious, bleeding into the filth of an alleyway on his own birthday, all the phrases that once held his life together begin rotting from the inside out. Have hope. Forgive them. They'll come around. It's what the Hokage would want. It's what the Will of Fire means. In another story, those words would rescue him. In this one, they become the final insult. Because while Naruto is dying in the garbage, those words do not protect him. They do not comfort him. They do not stop the pain. They do not make anyone come back for him. All they do is remind him how many chances he has already given to people who would rather see him dead. And that is the real divergence point. Not the blood, not the power, not even the violence. The true point of no return is the moment Naruto decides that if he lives, he will never ask Konoha for love again. That is when the old dream dies. The dream of becoming Hokage. The dream of earning smiles. The dream of hearing people say his name without venom. That boy, the one still trying to believe in acceptance, effectively bleeds out in that alley before the power even arrives. What rises in his place is something colder, smarter, more honest about what the world has done to him. Then comes the dog. It is such a cruel little detail, and that is exactly why it works. Naruto is dying. A stray animal wanders close, sniffing at what might already be a corpse. And in one desperate feral act, Naruto grabs it. He crushes its neck. He tastes blood. And in that instant, survival and transformation become the same thing. He is no longer waiting for the world to save him. He is taking life with his own hands because no one has left him any other choice. The blood becomes the sacrament of his rebirth. This story's version of Naruto doesn't awaken some noble inherited destiny. He awakens hemomancy through rage, trauma, and the pure refusal to die. The dog's blood moves through him. His wounds begin to close. The marks of torture start to vanish. Red mist coils around his body like hatred given shape, and the symbolism could not be clearer. The thing Konoha feared has not been unleashed because Naruto was secretly evil all along. It has been created by the village's own cruelty. That is why the vow he makes here matters so much. He does not vow justice. He does not vow escape. He does not even vow revenge in the simple sense. He vows to destroy hope the way his own was destroyed. That is darker than anger. Anger still reacts. This is a mission statement. Naruto decides that if the village wanted the monster, then he will become exactly that. Not as an accident, not as a breakdown, but as a deliberate answer. He will make them grieve more. He will make them feel what helplessness tastes like. He will stop being the child who absorbs pain and start becoming the force that returns it. And the next morning is where the horror becomes real. Because he wakes up alive, his body is healed, his senses are altered. He can hear hearts beating. He can smell blood. He can see the rhythm of life moving through people around him. The world itself has changed, and more importantly, so has the lens through which he sees it. When he looks at the villagers now, he does not see possible friends, teachers, or future comrades. He sees systems of flesh and fear. He sees bodies full of vulnerable currents. He sees prey. That is a huge shift, and the fic understands it. It doesn't make Naruto erupt into open slaughter right away. Instead, it gives us something better for long-term storytelling. Curiosity, experimentation, calculation. Naruto goes home, tests the limits of his blood manipulation, cuts himself to see what happens, and realizes that this power can harden, move, retract, and heal. The blood listens. It answers intent. It becomes a weapon only after becoming language, and that restraint matters because it tells us what kind of dark protagonist this Naruto is going to be. Not a mindless berserker, not a screaming edgelord. A patient monster. When Iruka finds him in the forest, the confrontation says everything. Naruto doesn't beg to be understood. He doesn't lash out with childish whining. He speaks with resentment so focused it unsettles Iruka immediately. He lays out what he believes now. The teachers never cared. The village always hated him, and all that talk about forgiveness was a lie meant to keep him obedient. Then he says the line that defines the rest of the story. If they want a monster, he'll become one. That is the first time Konoha is forced to hear, plainly, what it has done. And the scariest part is that Naruto means it. By the time he walks back to the village, something fundamental has changed. The glares no longer wound him the same way. They clarify him. Even the random cruelty of someone throwing a stone becomes different now. Before, it would have been another humiliation to survive. Now, it becomes proof. Proof that he was right. Proof that mercy was wasted on these people. Proof that every restraint he abandons from this point onward will feel justified in his own mind. That is what makes this first part so strong. It is not just dark for shock value. It is building a philosophy. Naruto's new creed is taking shape piece by piece. Hope is weakness. Forgiveness is exploitation. Kindness without power is just another way to be sacrificed. And the village that raised him on those ideas is about to learn what happens when he starts applying the opposite principles instead. Because the blood is only the beginning. The real threat now is the mind attached to it. And the moment the Hokage tries to pull Naruto back toward the language of dreams, patience, and hope, this story is going to take an even darker turn. The Hokage still believes this can be fixed. That is what makes the next phase of the story so dangerous. Hiruzen Sarutobi is not looking at Naruto and seeing a war already beginning inside him. He is looking at a wounded child who can still be nudged back toward the light with the right words, the right promise, the right appeal to duty. In any other version of Naruto, that instinct might have saved the day. Here, it only proves how badly Konoha misunderstands the boy it spent years breaking. When Naruto is summoned to the Hokage's office, the scene immediately turns into something bigger than a simple lecture. It becomes a clash between two worldviews. On one side is Hiruzen, still trying to preserve the village's moral story about itself. On the other side is Naruto, who has already stopped believing that story has anything to do with reality. And the most chilling part is that Naruto enters this conversation with more control than anyone around him realizes. He notices the hidden A and BU. He watches heartbeats. He measures the room. He is angry, yes, but he is no longer only angry. He is alert. He is learning how to survive politically as well as physically. Hiruzen starts with the obvious question. What did Naruto mean when he told Iruka he would become what Konoha wanted him to be? And Naruto answers with a kind of calm that is far more unsettling than a tantrum would have been. He tells the Hokage exactly what he is now. A monster. Konoha's monster. Not because he was born that way, not because some darkness finally surfaced, but because that is the only identity the village ever consistently offered him. In other words, if society names you a demon for long enough, punishes you as a demon, isolates you as a demon, and leaves you to die as a demon, then, eventually, the label stops sounding like an accusation and starts sounding like a job description. That is the brilliant cruelty of this exchange. Naruto is not merely lashing out at the village's hatred. He is weaponizing its own logic against it. He is forcing Hiruzen to hear the sentence Konoha has been writing across Naruto's life since childhood. You told me what I was. Fine, I listened. And Hiruzen, in one of the most important failures of this entire opening arc, answers with the same poison that created the problem in the first place. Forgive them. Have hope. That is the moment the conversation stops being salvageable. Because from Naruto's perspective, this is not compassion. This is betrayal in its purest form. The most powerful man in the village, a man who absolutely knows enough to understand the weight of what Naruto is saying, still asks the victim to carry the moral burden. Still asks the child who was tortured, humiliated, and nearly killed to be the one who endures a little longer, forgives a little more, hopes a little harder. Hiruzen may mean it as mercy, but to Naruto it sounds like confirmation. No one is coming to save him, not even now, not even after all this. And once that happens, the entire emotional balance of the scene shifts. Naruto is no longer waiting for validation. He is gathering evidence. Every excuse Hiruzen makes only deepens the trench between them. Every attempt to frame Konoha as redeemable only proves, in Naruto's eyes, that the village values its own comforting myths more than the reality of what was done to him. Then Hiruzen makes his next mistake. He invokes Naruto's dream. The old dream. Becoming Hokage. Earning acknowledgement. Rising above the hatred. It is exactly the sort of appeal that would have worked on the Naruto Konoha preferred, the version of him who still believed achievement could purchase love. But that boy is gone now, and the story makes it very clear that Naruto feels almost disgusted hearing those dreams brought back out in front of him like they still mean something. To him, the Hokage is asking him to keep chasing acceptance from people who have already shown they would rather watch him bleed. This is where part 2 really starts showing its teeth, because Naruto's darkness isn't just emotional. It is philosophical. He doesn't reject being Hokage because he has lost ambition. He rejects it because the entire office now looks hollow to him. Why would he want to become the protector of people who never protected him? Why would he want to serve a village that only remembered his humanity when it wanted his obedience? Why should he keep giving love to a place that answered him with fear and cruelty? That is the core of his transformation. Naruto is not moving from good to evil in some childish straight line. He is moving from faith to anti-faith. He once believed in Konoha's ideals so deeply that he was willing to suffer for them. Now he believes those ideals are the tools used to keep him suffering. That reversal is what gives the story its momentum. The blood power may be the visual hook, but this ideological fracture is the real engine. Then comes one of the cleverest turns in the conversation. Hiruzen, desperate to pull Naruto back from the edge, mentions his parents. That lands differently than the old man expects. For a second, this isn't even about revenge anymore. It's about the shape of the lie surrounding Naruto's life. Hiruzen has always dodged these questions before. He has always implied that looking backward would do no good. But now, under pressure, he reveals just enough to confirm Naruto's suspicion that there are truths being withheld from him, important truths, dangerous truths. The kind that might explain not only who he is, but why the village has managed his life the way it has. And Naruto, for the first time in this new state, does something even more dangerous than raging. He adapts. He realizes he doesn't need to explode here. He doesn't need to expose everything he is becoming. He just needs to learn how to use what people want from him. Hiruzen wants the old Naruto back, the noisy, hopeful, gullible child who can still be guided with small promises and emotional bait. So Naruto gives him a glimpse of that performance, not because he is healed, not because he is convinced, but because he sees utility in the mask. If playing along earns him information, opportunity, or reduced suspicion, then playing the fool becomes another weapon. That is a major evolution. Up until now, Naruto's darkness has been honest, raw, almost volcanic. Here, it starts becoming strategic. He agrees to the Hokage's challenge. Graduate. Become a Chunin. Earn the right to learn about his parents. On the surface, this looks like Hiruzen stabilizing the situation. Underneath, it is the birth of a far more effective predator. Because Naruto is no longer just a boy with rage and a new power. He is becoming a boy who understands that deception, patience, and appearances can buy him time. And the story wastes no time showing how quickly that lesson takes hold. The minute Naruto leaves the office, he is already thinking ahead. He notices the movement of hidden operatives. He senses the machinery of village surveillance turning toward him. He understands that he is being watched, and instead of panicking, he starts factoring that into his plans. That is the moment Konoha should be most afraid, though it has no idea yet. Not because Naruto is strongest here, but because he is learning how to become harder to read. Then the story gives us a smaller scene that says a lot about where his mind is heading. Naruto speaks to the administrative woman in the Hokage building and asks for books on business management. On the surface, it almost feels random. A weird little side beat after all the emotional weight. It isn't random at all. It reveals the next stage of his thinking. He is already looking beyond immediate revenge. He wants knowledge that helps him understand money, power, organization, leverage. He is starting to think in structures. That matters because this is the point where the story quietly widens its scope. A weaker version of this premise would have Naruto just sprint from one act of violence to the next. But this fic understands that sustained menace comes from systems. Naruto wants more than catharsis. He wants position. He wants the ability to take from Konoha the things that let it function, and to do that, he needs more than blood blades and hatred. He needs planning. He needs skill. He needs information. Even here, near the beginning, the story is laying the foundation for a rise narrative rather than a simple revenge spiral. And once Naruto gets back home, that foundation keeps building. He studies, he experiments. He tries to split his attention between reading and controlling blood at the same time, turning what should be a boring task into disciplined training. He tests shape, density, and motion. He starts wondering how far this power can go, whether it can be used not just to kill, but to control, to animate, to extend his reach in ways no one around him would anticipate yet. He is still rough, still inexperienced, still getting headaches from overuse, but the important thing is that he is no longer simply discovering ability. He is training with purpose. That is what separates awakening from mastery. And this story is very interested in the stretch between them. Because Naruto is still weak in the broader world, he knows that. He cannot crush the village yet. He cannot openly challenge real shinobi yet. But he now has three things he did not have before. A power no one expects, a hatred he no longer feels ashamed of, and a growing willingness to think ahead instead of just striking back. The combination is what makes him dangerous. By the end of this phase, the mood has changed again. In part 1, Naruto died as a believer. In this part, he survives his first ideological test. Hiruzen tries to pull him back into the village's story, and Naruto walks away having learned something much more useful than comfort. He learns that adults lie best when they think they are being kind. He learns that even power can be manipulated if it is desperate enough. And most importantly, he learns that pretending to hope can sometimes serve despair better than open rage ever could. Which means the next time Konoha looks at Naruto and sees a noisy, reckless academy failure, it may already be too late. Because beneath the mask, the First Hemomancer is no longer just trying to survive the village. He is starting to study how to break it. That is when Naruto begins building something far more dangerous than rage. Up to this point, his transformation has been emotional and ideological. He has lost faith in Konoha, rejected the language of forgiveness, and learned that pretending to play along can be more useful than open rebellion. But now, the story makes its next major move. Naruto stops thinking like a victim waiting for the right moment to strike back, and starts thinking like someone who intends to outgrow the cage entirely. He is still just a child in the academy on paper. In reality, he is already trying to map out how a village survives, what keeps it rich, what keeps it stable, and where to sink the knife first when the time comes. That shift matters because it changes the kind of threat he is becoming. A weaker, dark Naruto story would be content to let him lash out scene by scene, inflicting pain wherever anger points him. This fic does something more interesting. It lets him discover a frustrating truth very early. Hatred alone is not enough. Naruto knows he is still too weak to fight seasoned shinobi directly. He knows blood control gives him terrifying options, but not instant dominance. He knows he cannot just storm the village and expect revenge to carry him through. So instead of pretending strength he does not have, he does something much colder. He studies, he experiments, he begins planning for a future where power is built, not wished into existence. You can see that in the way he spends his time at home. He reads while controlling blood in his palm, forcing himself to divide his attention and train concentration at the same time. He tests the limits of shape, motion, density, and absorption. He even starts wondering whether blood can be used for more than blades and spikes, whether it might eventually let him manipulate corpses, command bodies, or create tools of control that go far beyond ordinary violence. He fails some of these tests. He gets headaches, he misjudges his own limits. But that failure is important because it gives the story a sense of progression. Naruto is not a completed monster yet. He is an inventor working in darkness, teaching himself what kind of nightmare he can become. And once that begins, school becomes something new as well. Not a place to belong, not even a place to endure. A laboratory. By this stage, Naruto no longer sees the academy as a humiliating routine he must escape. He sees it as a contained ecosystem full of weak minds, predictable people, and future assets or liabilities. That is why his return there feels so different from the boy we knew before. He does not come back hoping to fit in. He comes back already emotionally detached, looking at classmates and teachers as if they are pieces on a board he has finally decided to stop respecting. And the first thing the story does with that is sharpen his social brutality. There is no sentimental reconciliation waiting here. When Sakura gets in his face, Naruto doesn't fire back with a goofy insult or embarrassed defensiveness. He cuts deeper than that. He makes it clear that even the idea of friendship with these people now feels like a waste of his time. He pushes her aside, humiliates her in front of the class, and strips all the old schoolyard dynamics down to what he now thinks they are: petty, shallow, and beneath him. It is not just anger talking there. It is contempt. He has stopped wanting their approval so completely that even their emotional leverage over him begins to disappear. That is a huge development because Konoha's hold on Naruto was never only physical, it was emotional. The village could hurt him so effectively because he still wanted something from it. Recognition, friendship, some tiny proof that all the suffering would eventually be repaid. Once that desire starts dying, the village loses one of its greatest weapons against him. He is harder to shame, harder to bait, harder to contain. But the academy scene gets even darker when the story reveals what Naruto is really trying to do there. He is not just being cruel, he is experimenting with control. By this point, Naruto has already learned that blood connection changes what he can do to a person. The more directly his blood is mixed with someone else's, the stronger his influence becomes. That is why Uzuki Yugao matters so much in this section. She is one of the earliest and most important proofs that Naruto's power is not limited to making blood into weapons. It can also become domination. Suggestion. Command. A way of turning someone stronger than him into an unwilling extension of his will. He cannot fully replicate that level of control on his classmates yet because he has not forged the same blood connection with them, but he manages enough mental pressure to shock the room into compliance and make them ignore what just happened. That alone tells us how quickly his power is evolving from physical threat into psychological warfare. And this is where the story starts showing us Naruto's first true ally, even if ally is the wrong word. Because Yugao is not a friend, she is a hostage, a servant, a weapon, and a warning. The fic makes that dynamic wonderfully ugly. Naruto has managed to entangle her deeply enough that she is forced into obedience even while hating him. She resents him, wants to provoke him, wants him to feel some fraction of the humiliation and rage she feels. But what makes the relationship so effective in narrative terms is that Naruto mostly refuses to give her the emotional reaction she wants. He doesn't need her affection. He barely needs her respect. He needs utility. That's colder than revenge, and that is precisely why she works as such an important mirror for the stage he is in. Naruto is learning to treat people the way Konoha treated him, not as human beings with inner lives, but as tools to be managed until they stop being useful. At the same time, the story smartly avoids making him omnipotent here. Naruto knows Yugao is dangerous. He knows his hold over her is not absolute. He suspects, correctly, that if it turns into a pure contest of will, she could break free. That awareness keeps the tension alive. He has a powerful asset, but one that could explode in his hands at any moment. Which means every order he gives her, every mission he sends her on, every humiliation he chooses to inflict instead of postponing, carries risk. He is building leverage before he fully understands how to secure it. That risk is exactly why his next move feels so revealing. He sends Yugao on a mission into the red light district. Not for random shock value, but because he is already broadening his field of action beyond school, beyond personal While she is out doing his work, Naruto stays behind with his business books and his blood training. That contrast is one of the best quiet details in this whole early stretch. On one side, he is still a child, sitting with stolen books and half-finished ideas about money and power. On the other, he is already directing an ANBU operative like a miniature crime lord in the making. The gap between what he looks like and what he is becoming gets wider by the chapter. And that is the true heart of Part 3. Not simply that Naruto is darker now, but that he is beginning to scale. He is no longer trapped in the emotional geography of one alley, one classroom, one conversation with the Hokage. He is beginning to connect humiliation, money, influence, secrecy, and force into a larger shape. He wants to know how villages thrive. He wants to know how businesses work. He wants to know how missions become income and income becomes stability. Because revenge, in his mind, is no longer just hurting the people who hurt him. Revenge is taking away their certainty, their economy, their comfort, their future. That is what makes this section feel like the birth of an underworld arc before the underworld has fully arrived. Naruto is still crude in places, still improvising, still too prone to petty cruelty when old wounds are touched. But under that, a very specific kind of intelligence is growing. He is learning the difference between pain and pressure, between killing someone and owning them, between hating a system and understanding how to dismantle it. And once he learns that difference, the story can no longer stay small. Because a boy who only wants blood can be cornered. A boy who wants infrastructure, leverage, and obedience is something else entirely. He is becoming the kind of enemy who does not just strike Konoha from the outside. He intends to grow inside its blind spots first. And that is exactly why the next stage matters so much. Because once Naruto starts extending his reach beyond the academy and beyond these first acts of control, the question stops being whether Konoha can save him. It becomes whether Konoha will even notice the empire of resentment forming underneath it before the first real body drops. That first real step outside Konoha is where everything changes. Up until now, Naruto's world has been tightly contained. The alley, the academy, his apartment, the Hokage's office. Even when his thoughts grow bigger, the stage itself remains small. But the moment the story shifts him toward Kusagakure, that containment breaks. And once it breaks, Naruto is no longer just a problem inside one village. He becomes a variable in a much larger game. And what makes this transition so effective is that Naruto doesn't walk into it like a conqueror. He doesn't arrive announcing himself as the monster he's becoming. He arrives observant, controlled, watching. Because by now he understands something critical. The world outside Konoha isn't kinder, it's just more honest about how power works. Kusagakure is not a place built on ideals. It's built on tension, on fragile hierarchies, on people pretending to cooperate while quietly positioning themselves for advantage. And for Naruto, that kind of environment isn't hostile, it's familiar. That's why he adapts to it faster than anyone expects. The introduction of figures like Daijin and the internal conflict between the flower group and the fruit group immediately tells us that this village is divided, layered, and unstable. This isn't the clean structure of Konoha's military system. This is something messier, something closer to a marketplace of influence where alliances shift depending on who benefits. And Naruto recognizes the opportunity in that almost instantly. Because for someone who has already stopped believing in moral order, chaos is not a threat, it's a resource. And that's where Ryosetsu enters the story. Her presence changes the tone in a very specific way. Because unlike the academy students or even someone like Yugao, Ryosetsu isn't part of Naruto's past. She doesn't carry the same baggage of cruelty or rejection tied to Konoha. That makes her unpredictable in a different way. She isn't someone Naruto automatically hates, but she also isn't someone he trusts. She exists in a space where connection is possible, but only if Naruto chooses to allow it. And at this stage, that choice is already complicated by everything he's become. Their dynamic is one of the first times the story tests whether Naruto is still capable of forming something that isn't rooted in control. And the answer isn't simple. Because even when there's a hint of mutual understanding, even when there's a moment where things could go differently, Naruto's instincts keep pulling him back toward calculation. He listens, he observes, he engages. But underneath it all, he's still measuring value, still deciding what someone can give him, how they might be used, and what risk they represent if left unchecked. That doesn't mean Ryosetsu is irrelevant. It means she's dangerous in a different way, because she represents the kind of connection Naruto used to crave. And the more he distances himself from that part of his identity, the more any potential bond becomes a liability instead of a comfort. That tension sits quietly in the background, but it matters. Because this part of the story isn't just about expansion, it's about testing what's left of Naruto's humanity when he's no longer trapped in the environment that destroyed it. And while that plays out, the plot itself starts tightening around something much bigger than personal revenge. The box of ultimate bliss, Hazuki Castle, the prison system. These elements shift the narrative from a character-driven descent into something closer to a political and supernatural convergence point. The box isn't just another artifact. It's something tied to desire, power, and consequences on a scale that matches Naruto's growing ambition. And the prison setting introduces a new layer of control, confinement, and hidden agendas that mirrors Naruto's own internal evolution. Because here's the parallel the story is quietly drawing. Naruto was once trapped, powerless, at the mercy of others. Now he's entering a system built to trap others, and instead of fearing it, he starts learning how to use it. That's the turning point, because once Naruto begins interacting with structures like Hazuki Castle, he stops being a lone anomaly. He becomes part of the machinery. Or more accurately, he begins figuring out how to bend that machinery to his will. The mission itself becomes less important than what it allows him to see. Who holds authority? Who answers to whom? Where the weak points are? Where people cut corners? Where loyalty cracks under pressure? This is no longer about reacting to the world. This is about mapping it, and that's where the darker edge of Naruto's intelligence really starts to show. He doesn't just observe power. He observes how power fails. He watches how fear moves through people, how secrets are kept, how systems rely on trust that can be broken, and every one of those observations becomes a future weapon. At the same time, his control over blood continues evolving, not just in strength but in precision. What was once raw manipulation is becoming refined. Faster responses, cleaner formations, less visible strain, and more importantly, a growing understanding of when not to use it. That restraint is critical, because power that isn't seen is far more dangerous than power that announces itself. Naruto doesn't need to prove what he can do anymore. He needs to make sure no one fully understands it until it's too late, and that philosophy extends beyond combat. It shapes how he interacts with allies, how he hides his intentions, how he navigates the layered politics around him. Even when he participates in missions, even when he appears to cooperate, there's always that second layer of thought running underneath. What does this give me? What does this reveal? How does this move me closer to control? That's the version of Naruto we're dealing with now. Not a boy chasing revenge, not even a rogue ninja carving his own path, but something closer to a strategist growing in hostile territory, and that's exactly why this arc matters. Because Kusegakure doesn't just expand the setting, it validates Naruto's worldview. It shows him that the world really does operate on the rules he's starting to believe in. Power, leverage, control, not hope, not forgiveness, not ideals. And once that belief is reinforced outside Konoha, it becomes much harder to undo. Because now it's not just personal trauma shaping him, it's experience. And experience, unlike emotion, doesn't fade. By the time this phase of the story settles, Naruto has crossed another invisible line. He is no longer simply reacting to what was done to him. He is actively positioning himself within a broader system of power. He has seen another village, another structure, another set of players, and instead of being overwhelmed by it, he's already asking the only question that matters to him now. Where do I fit in this, if I'm not playing by their rules? And once that question takes hold, the answer is inevitable. He doesn't want to fit into the system, he wants to own parts of it. And the moment that ambition fully connects with the power he's been developing, that's when this story stops being about a broken child and becomes about something far more dangerous. A rising force that doesn't just survive in the shadows, but learns how to control them. The moment Naruto steps into the prison system, the story sheds its last illusions. Up until now, everything has been building toward this shift. The alley taught him survival. The academy taught him detachment. The Hokage taught him how power hides behind words. Kusegakure taught him how systems fracture under pressure. But Hozuki Castle, this place built to contain the worst of the world, teaches him something far more valuable. It teaches him that control doesn't come from strength alone. It comes from ownership of fear. And in a place like this, fear is currency. Hozuki Castle isn't just a prison, it's a hierarchy of desperation. Everyone inside is either trying to survive, trying to dominate, or trying not to be broken by someone stronger than them. Guards maintain order through authority, prisoners through violence, and the entire structure rests on one fragile assumption, that those inside cannot overturn the system that holds them. Naruto walks in already questioning that assumption. Because to him, this place doesn't feel like confinement. It feels like opportunity. That's the difference now. Where others see walls, Naruto sees boundaries to test. Where others see danger, he sees leverage. And where others see criminals, he sees potential assets. That mindset is what transforms this arc from a mission into the beginning of an empire. Because Naruto doesn't just exist inside the prison, he studies it. He watches how authority is enforced, which guards are strict, which are lazy, which are corruptible. He observes how prisoners interact, who commands respect, who survives by silence, who breaks under pressure. He maps the ecosystem the same way he once mapped his own suffering, but this time with control instead of helplessness. And once he understands it, he starts using it. This is where characters like Hana and Izumi become important, not as emotional anchors, but as indicators of Naruto's expanding reach. They are not friends in the traditional sense. They are survivors caught in the same system. And Naruto, instead of offering them rescue, offers something far more complicated. Alignment. He doesn't promise safety, he doesn't promise kindness, he offers advantage, and that distinction is everything. Because Naruto has learned that promises built on hope are fragile, but deals built on mutual benefit, those last longer, even if they're built on something darker. And that's exactly what begins forming here. Small connections, quiet agreements, unspoken hierarchies. Naruto isn't leading yet, not openly, but he is influencing. Positioning. Turning moments of weakness into points of control, and each time he does, the balance of power inside the prison shifts just slightly in his favor. At the same time, his use of blood evolves again, not just in strength, in purpose. What once served as survival and then as experimentation is now becoming a tool of enforcement, precision strikes, Silent manipulations, controlled displays of power that send a message without revealing everything. Naruto doesn't lash out randomly anymore. When he uses his ability, it's intentional, measured, designed to create impact beyond the immediate moment. Fear spreads differently when it's controlled, and Naruto is learning how to control it. That's what separates him now from the version of himself that woke up in that alley. Back then, he wanted the world to feel his pain. Now, he wants the world to respond to his presence. That's a much more dangerous goal, because pain is temporary, presence lingers, and inside a place like Hozuki Castle, reputation becomes power faster than strength alone ever could. Word spreads, quietly at first, about the boy who doesn't break, about the one who doesn't react the way others do, about the one who watches more than he speaks, and most importantly, about the one you don't want to provoke. That reputation becomes his first real foothold, not as a prisoner, but as something harder to categorize. Because Naruto doesn't fit into the existing roles. He's not trying to rise through brute force. He's not submitting. He's not aligning fully with any faction. He's doing something more subtle. He's making himself necessary. That's the key. Because once people begin to rely on you, whether for protection, for strategy, or simply because you represent a lesser threat than someone else, you stop being expendable. And once you're not expendable, you become difficult to remove. That's how systems are infiltrated. Not from the outside, from within. And Naruto is learning that faster than anyone realizes. But the prison isn't just a training ground for influence. It's also where the story tightens around the darker elements introduced earlier. The box of ultimate bliss, the hidden agendas surrounding it, the people who want to use it, control it, or survive it. This is where Naruto's path begins intersecting with forces that are bigger than any one village. The box represents something fundamental: desire given form, consequences tied to ambition, power that doesn't come without cost. And Naruto is exactly the kind of person drawn to it now, not because he believes in its promise, but because he understands what it represents. A shortcut, a catalyst, a weapon that could accelerate everything he's been building. And that makes this arc more than just an expansion. It becomes convergence, because now Naruto isn't just navigating people. He's navigating power structures tied to something far older and far more dangerous. At the same time, the underworld begins taking shape around him. The Red Dragon, criminal networks, figures like Takamura Shingen. These aren't just obstacles, they're pieces of a larger board, and Naruto doesn't approach them as enemies to defeat. He approaches them as systems to absorb. That's the most important shift in Part 5. He stops thinking in terms of destruction and starts thinking in terms of acquisition. If someone is useful, they don't need to be eliminated. They need to be controlled, redirected, repurposed. That philosophy changes everything. Because it means Naruto's growth isn't linear. It's exponential. Each new connection adds to his reach. Each new asset multiplies his options. Each new piece of information expands what he can do next. And suddenly, the boy who once lay dying in an alley is operating within a network of influence that stretches beyond Konoha entirely. That's the moment the story fully transforms. This is no longer a revenge narrative. This is the foundation of something much larger. An underworld presence, a growing organization. A structure built not on loyalty or ideology, but on leverage, fear, and calculated advantage. And the most unsettling part? Naruto isn't rushing it. He's patient, careful, willing to let things grow at their own pace as long as they grow in the right direction. Because he understands now that true control isn't about immediate domination, it's about inevitability. By the end of this phase, Naruto doesn't need to prove he's dangerous. That part is already done. What he's proving now, quietly, steadily, is that he can become something far worse than dangerous. He can become established. And once something like that takes root, it doesn't get removed easily. It spreads, it adapts, it survives. And by the time anyone realizes how far it's gone, it's already too late. By the time Naruto steps fully into the underworld, there is no trace left of the boy who once waited for kindness. What remains is something far more deliberate, because this final stretch of the story isn't about transformation anymore. It's about consolidation. Everything Naruto has learned, pain, control, deception, patience, leverage, begins locking into place. The scattered pieces from earlier arcs stop feeling like experiments and start behaving like a system. And the moment that system stabilizes, the tone shifts again. Not louder, not more chaotic, quieter, colder, more controlled. That's how you know he's crossed the last line, because truly dangerous power doesn't need to announce itself. It just starts working. The encounters with figures like Takamura Shingen make that clear almost immediately. In a different phase of the story, this would have been a confrontation, a clash, a test of strength. But Naruto doesn't approach it that way anymore. He doesn't need to prove dominance through spectacle. He needs results, information, submission, utility. And if those things can be extracted without chaos, then chaos becomes unnecessary. That's where the story's edge sharpens. Because Naruto's methods evolve into something far more unsettling than open violence. He learns how to break people without destroying them, how to push just far enough to force compliance while keeping the subject intact. Torture, in this context, isn't rage, it's process, controlled, measured, purpose-driven. That distinction matters because it shows how far removed he is now from the emotional storm that created him. The hatred is still there, but it's no longer steering. It's fueling something much more efficient, and that efficiency spreads outward. The Red Dragon Network, the prison connections, the fractured groups he encountered earlier. They begin aligning not through loyalty but through pressure. Some follow because they're afraid. Some because they benefit. Some because they see where things are heading and choose not to stand in the way. And Naruto doesn't correct any of them. He doesn't need devotion, he needs function. That's the architecture of what he's building. Not a family, not a village, an organization. And unlike Konoha, it doesn't pretend to be anything else. That's what makes it stronger. Because there are no illusions to maintain, no ideals to protect, no moral image to uphold, only outcomes. And as that structure takes shape, Naruto's role within it becomes clearer. He isn't just participating anymore, he's centralizing. Information flows toward him, decisions pass through him, power stabilizes around him. Even when he isn't physically present, his influence is. That's the moment where presence turns into authority. And authority, once established, becomes self-reinforcing, because people start acting differently when they believe someone is in control. They hesitate, they comply faster, they make decisions based on what they think that person would want. Naruto doesn't have to command every action anymore. The system begins to anticipate him. That's real power, and it's happening quietly. At the same time, the larger elements of the story, things like the box of ultimate bliss, continue hovering over everything. But notice how Naruto interacts with it now. Earlier, something like that might have been tempting as a shortcut. Now, it's just another variable, another tool. Something to be evaluated, not worshipped, because Naruto no longer believes in solutions that come from outside. He believes in control that comes from within. That's a fundamental shift. And it means that even when faced with something ancient, dangerous, and capable of reshaping reality itself, he doesn't lose focus. He integrates it, or prepares to. That's what makes this final phase feel less like a climax and more like the beginning of something larger. Because instead of everything converging into a single decisive battle, the story spreads outward. More influence, more reach, more connections, more systems bending slowly toward Naruto's control. And that expansion is what replaces a traditional ending. There is no neat resolution here, no final victory where everything is settled, because Naruto isn't trying to end the conflict. He's building something that can outlast it. That's why the emotional tone at the end matters so much. There's no redemption arc waiting in the wings, no sudden return to who he used to be. The question of whether Naruto could have been saved doesn't disappear, but it becomes irrelevant to him, because from his perspective, nothing was taken from him that he hasn't replaced. Hope, replaced with certainty. Acceptance, replaced with control. Love, replaced with leverage. And, in his mind, those replacements are stronger, more reliable, less likely to betray him. That's the final, quiet tragedy of the story. Not that Naruto becomes a monster, but that he becomes a version of himself that no longer needs anything human to function, and the world around him begins adapting to that reality. People align, systems shift, power structures adjust, not because they agree with him, but because they have to. And somewhere far behind all of that, the village that created him continues moving forward, unaware of how much has already changed, unaware that the boy they tried to ignore has stopped trying to be seen, unaware that the monster they feared has stopped needing to prove anything at all. Because the most dangerous thing Naruto has become is not someone who wants revenge, it's someone who no longer needs it. And that's where this story leaves us, not at the end of a war, but at the moment just before one truly begins. Because everything Naruto has built so far, it's still growing, still spreading, still learning, and when it finally turns its full attention back toward Konoha, it won't be as a victim, it won't even be as a rival, it will be as something far worse, something the village helped create, something it never understood, and something it may no longer be able to stop. This is how one broken promise reshaped everything. And in stories like this, that's what makes alternate timelines so unsettling, because sometimes the difference between a hero and a nightmare isn't destiny, it's how long they were forced to suffer alone. If you want to see where this path leads next, stay with us, because this isn't the end of the story. It's only the point where the consequences finally begin. This is how one broken promise can reshape everything. Because in this version of the story, Naruto didn't lose his way. He followed it all the way to the end of what hope could give him, and what replaced it was something far more dangerous, not a hero, not even a villain, but a force that no longer needs either side to define it. And the scariest part? Konoha may not realize what it created until it's far too late. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dive alternate timelines like this one. And if you want to see what happens next, when Naruto finally turns his full attention back to the village, let me know in the comments, because this story is only just getting started.